Okay, so we're looking at classes in Python, and this is kind of like after functions. The next thing that we have is classes, and it sort of like will bring us to an end in a way. But classes are huge. Everything in Python effectively is an object, and everything sort of like forms these classings. So, like if we did, for example, a equals 10, for example, just an integer, and then we print the type of A. If you just notice this, it always says class in, and we sort of like ignored the class bit, in every single video up until this point. We just talked about the integer part, but A is of type integer, and here if we do, in fact, we just keep the 10 here and just like put it in the quotations. It's then a class of string. So we've got these classes effectively, and we were able to do A and say, for example, B here like this, and do 10 plus 20 or hello. And we had a rule here where we could do C equals A plus B, and that was fine. Oh no, sorry, that wasn't fine. Because we got I'm supposed to put a comma there. So let's just run that again, and that's perfectly fine. We've got a class of string here for A, and in fact, so that's fine. But we're able to run through the code. But if we were to take this one out, to just have A, and so we were able to add up these two strings together, or that's called concatenation. But if we try to do this, we get thrown this error message, and basically it says unsupported type for operands, unsupported operand types for plus, int and string, and it's referring to these classes basically where it doesn't know how to deal with an integer class and a string class together. So Python has rules to deal with a string class and a string class, and it has rules to deal with a string class plus a float class, like an int plus a float, and it can deal with an int plus an int. So certain classes can interact and other ones can't interact. But just deeper into that, also we had like our native data types, but now we're able to, with classes, we'll see that we're able to create these new data types. So the first thing that we're going to do is we'll just jump into it really and create a class. So we'll do this, which is class, and we'll just say person. There's so many things that we could do, but this is basically how we create a class in Python. And we could even just leave it like that, or let's just say name equals Darren. Right, now once we've created a class, and it's as simple as that, literally all we use is a class keyword and then whatever the class is. The only one thing to note is that the first letter of the class is usually capitalized. Again, it's a convention in Python, you don't have to capitalize it, but capitalizing it is the convention. It tells other people who are reading your code that this is we're expecting it to be a class, and that's from the capitalization. Although anyway, I guess if we hovered over it, it says class of person. If we did the lowercase, it would still work. It'd be perfectly fine. It's just not what the convention is. So we kind of like to stick to that. And once we've created the class, we then need to instantiate the class, create an instance of a class. So create instance of class. It's called instantiating the class as well, but that's a little bit of a mouthful. So I just sort of create an instance of the class, and we just say that P equals person, and we want the capital one, obviously. And that's it. We've created an instance of the class, and we can get things out of the class now. There's two types of things that we can get. They are the attributes and the methods. At the moment, all we see is one attribute. The attribute is Darren. So let's just do P and then dot. And then we can see something that we've seen kind of like before. We see the drop down list come up, and we see P dot name, and we can just kind of like run that. We see, Darren pops up. That's it. So we're able to see, we can create as many attributes as we like. But we can also create methods on a class. So for example, we can do a function inside of a class. Now a function inside of a class is called a method. So we could say this is a method. And let's just have this method being say hello. There's one thing about a class, a method in a class, and that is that the method of a class always has one variable in it, and at least one variable, and that variable is actually referring to the class itself. And again, just by convention, this variable is usually called self. So it doesn't do anything other than refers to the class itself. And that's why it's called self. In other languages, in Node.js, for example, it's called, and JavaScript, it's called this. I'm not sure what it's called in C, but yeah. So, but we could call it what we liked. We could call it S, for example, but it's nearly always everywhere. The convention is self, which refers to the class. Now, we've created a method of the class, and let's just inside our method do print hello world. So we could do sort of like a say hello method and print it, and we can expose the methods in the same way that we expose the attributes. So the methods and attributes all come up with this p dot, and we've got here p dot say hello. And when we run this, if we can now do we'll do print here just to have this here, and so like my name, or the person's name over here, and then we've also got a say hello methods. Now we've got the person's name, which is Darren, and then say hello. The nice thing about classes is this, which is that we can have, you know, a person p1, and then we can create another instance of the person. So we can also have p2 equals person, and we've effectively got a template for whatever the person is. We can create as many people as we like, and here we'd have p1.name. Now the issue is this, and we'll probably get onto this in another video, is we just need to think about what happens in terms of the second person's name, because we'll actually put person one name, and then we'll do person two name. But let's just have a look, copy that and paste this one over here, and we'll change this one to person two, and there we go. Now p1 and p2 have the same methods and attributes that are available to them. So if we do p2 dot say hello, well, that's going to be perfectly fine. We should be able to run it. But where we do p2.name, we've still got Darren. So we've got an issue here where this attribute is actually common to both of the people, and obviously we want the people to have a different, when we create our person, we want them to have a different name, and at this moment they're both called Darren, so we're forced to have a name like Darren. So one extra thing that's always in the classes, and this is very common, we'll see it nearly all of the time, is we'll have this function, and it's a inbuilt function, which is the initialization function. It's often known as the constructor. So this is the constructor. And again, this initialization function will always have the self keyword in it. So it will look like that. And what happens is that this initialization function, so this constructor, is by default always run when the class is created. And the way to get the name into the class is by this, which is we'd put in name in here, and then we would refer to the class itself, and this is the common pattern. So we do self dot name equals name. Now we're just going to comment this one out over here, and in fact we're going to change it to something else just to show. But when we do p1.person now, if we do the open brackets, it's actually asking us for a name, and it's well, names of type any. We'll change that to string actually afterwards. And this is the constructor, so we're actually in the constructor part of it. So let's just do that. We'll put a name in here. So now we've got Darren over there, and in this one we can have another one. So in fact we won't even use Darren anymore. We will use Alice and Bob, A and B. There we go. We've got Alice and Bob, and now when we run our code, we've got hello Alice and hello Bob. So what's the purpose? So this is known as an attribute. Name is an attribute, and we've taken name from the constructor, the initialization, and it's gone into and we've set it here as an attribute. So what's the purpose of an attribute here? Well, this one's a common attribute. So we could say so like instead of having the name, which is something that's unique to each person, and that would be done in the initialization, we might have things that are common to each person. So like, for example, all people are humans, so we could put a classification, and so like instead of having a name, it'd be human. Now each one of these, so when we run the code again, if we were to do here, so we could do print the classification of person 1, and we could get p1 dot, and then we see that we've got classification available, we've got name available, and we've got hello, and we can see that there is also a slightly different shape. So this here is a method of the class, and these two here are attributes of the class. So we just pull up the classification one tab. So the classification of person 1 is p1.classification. Control Z, and I meant to copy that and paste it over here, and the classification of person 2 is p2.classification. And now when we run that, we actually see that the classification of both person 1 and person 2 are human, and that's because it's set over here. Now we could, if we wanted to, overwrite one of these classifications. So we could say, for example, and we could actually create attributes of a class as well on our own. So we could say p1.classification equals not human. So we've overwritten the p1's classification, but that won't have affected p2. So when we run our piece of code, we now get the classification of person 1 is not human. So that's just generally an overview of classes. It's really just an introduction. We can create a class by just using the class keyword. We then put whatever the class is in terms of what we want to name it. We try and use a capital because that's a convention, is to use a capital. We can have methods that are common to all classes. We can have methods that are, so we can have attributes that are common to all classes. We can have attributes that are common to specific classes, and we can also have methods that are available in classes, and we'll go into more detail on all of those. So that's it really as an introduction to classes in Python.